pot's causes by way of their own entity, the pot is not an effect existent by way of its own entity. Thus there is nowhere a pot that exists by way of its own entity apart from its components like visible form and so forth. Since a pot cannot be found isolated from its components, a pot which is a different entity from them does not exist. Assertion: the pot is the effect of its components, such as clay, and they are its causes. Answer: if the pot exists by virtue of its causes, and those causes exist by virtue of other causes, how can that which does not exist by virtue of its own entity produce a disparate effect? Anything, therefore, that needs to rely on causes does not exist by way of its own entity. If it existed by way of its own entity, it follows that it would be causeless. This reasoning, which refutes the existence of a pot by way of its own entity, should be applied to all effects. Assertion: though it has many components, the pot is a truly existent single unit.
Answer: though visible form, smell, and so forth meet and combine, form cannot be smell, for the things that create the composite do not give up their different characteristics. Though form, smell, and so forth combine, they do not have one nature. Thus, just as the pot as a truly existent single unit was refuted by the words, in stanza, the composite too cannot be a truly existent single unit. Just as the previously explained reasoning shows that there is no truly existent pot apart from form, smell, and so forth, there is no truly existent component visible form apart from the great elements such as air, for it is imputed in dependence upon these. Just as visible form, smell, and the like cannot exist without air and so forth, the great elements too do not exist by way of their own entity without relying on each other. Thus fire is that which bombs, and the other three elements that which is burnt. Fire burns only fuel whose nature is the other three elements, yet hot fuel is fire and no longer fuel to be burnt. If it is not hot, since it is unrelated to fire, how will it burn? Thus fuel independent of fire does not exist by way of its own entity, and because of this, fire independent of fuel does not exist by way of its own entity either. Assertion: fuel is hard and so forth, but not hot by nature. When it is overpowered by fire, it grows hot and is that which is burnt.
Answer: even if fuel grows hot only when overpowered by fire, why is it not fire? It follows that it should be fire because it is hot and burns. Yet if fuel is not hot at that time, it is implausible to claim that something else which is not hot is present in fire. In that case, just heat divorced from the other three elements would be fire. But if one of the great elements does not exist, the others cannot exist either. Moreover, it contradicts the statement, things that arise simultaneously are reciprocal effects like the elements. Assertion: since the other three elements are not present in the smallest substantial fire particle, there is fire even without fuel.
Answer: fire without fuel exists if the smallest fire particle does not have fuel. Since it therefore would follow that uncaused fire exists, one should not assert a smallest substantial particle as do the Vaisesikas. If one admits that even the fire particle has fuel, for fear of the conclusion that it would otherwise be causeless, it follows that there is no single-natured particle since the other elements are certainly present in each particle. When functional things like pots and woolen cloth are examined as to whether they are or are not truly existent, these various things, because they have parts, do not have truly existent singleness. Nor do they have truly existent plurality for the very reason by which they are not truly single, since plurality comes about through an accumulation of single units. External and internal phenomena are not truly existent because they are neither one nor many. They are like reflections. One may think this refutation applies to our own sectarians who assert that the elements and elemental derivatives occur simultaneously, but not to outsiders who assert that a small permanent earth particle which is a single unit exists where there are no functional things apart from the smallest particles such as earth particles and so forth. Yet even in their system the smallest earth particle is threefold in that it has substantial entity, singleness, and existence. Attributes have attributiveness, singleness, and existence. By virtue of the fact that everything is threefold even in their system, just unaccompanied singleness does not exist. Thus precisely the same fallacies apply to them.
Those who have mastered the art of employing the meaning of suchness always refute oneness, otherness, both and neither by applying the kinds of reasoning which refute the assertions of those like the Samkhyas who claim the effect exists at the time of the cause, of the Sautrantikas who assert that cause and effect truly exist but that the effect does not exist at the time of the cause, Of the Nirgranthas who assert both existence and non-existence in that a thing is permanent in nature yet temporarily impermanent, and of those who assert that though things are substantially existent, they neither exist nor do not exist since they cannot be said to be this nor that. They apply the reasons previously explained in Stanza. For those who assert effects exist, the reason of dependent arising, the lack of being one or many, the diamond fragments reason, and so forth. Question: If things therefore do not have the slightest inherent existence, for what reason do those opponents hold that they are truly existent?
Answer: Though there is no valid reason, in the case of a thing which lasts 3 days, they feel compelled to assert that whatever existed before must exist later. Functional things are said to be permanent, and the continuum which is posited through imputation upon former, intermediate and later moments is misapprehended. Similarly, when the composite is misapprehended, it is said that there are truly existent functional things. There seem to be even many adherents to the 7 treatises on valid cognition, who, through not knowing how to posit the composite and the continuum, follow outsiders. Objection: Even if our view that things exist were wrong, your view is that things do not exist, since you do not accept functional things. It is unreasonable because it contradicts both what is seen and unseen. Answer: We make no claim that things do not exist, for we are proponents of dependent arising. Question: Do you assert that things are truly existent?
Answer: No, because we are proponents of dependent arising. Question: What does that mean? Answer: It means that while things are empty of inherent existence, like magical creations and mirages, they can produce effects. Any relative thing which is found to arise and exist dependently is not found to exist independently. All these phenomena lack an independent mode of existence, and thus there is no self of persons or of phenomena. The person and the aggregates do not exist inherently because they arise dependently. Question: We too accept that effects are not independent, so what is the difference?
Answer: The difference is that you do not understand that dependent arising means mutual reliance. Since nothing is produced by way of its own entity, things do not assemble and come together to produce an effect unless there is an effect to produce. Since anything inherently existent would be permanent, it could not rely on an effect. Aggregation for the sake of an effect is not included within the perception of the exalted during meditative equipoise, which sees suchness, because it directly perceives the lack of inherent existence of things. One gains release from cyclic existence when deluded ignorance which conceives things as truly existent ends. This depends on understanding emptiness of inherent existence. The seed of worldly existence is the conception that phenomena are truly existent. Objects such as form are its sphere of activity. The seed of worldly existence is destroyed, and one attains liberation by seeing that these objects lack an inherently existent self and by gaining familiarity with this. On becoming a hearer or solitary realizer foe destroyer, or on reaching the 8th ground, one achieves the complete elimination of conceptions of true existence.
The summarizing stanza. This is the 14th chapter of the 400 on the yogic deeds, showing how to meditate on the refutation of extreme conceptions. This concludes the commentary on the 14th chapter, showing how to meditate on the refutation of extreme conceptions, from Essence of Good Explanations, explanation of the 400 on the yogic deeds of Bodhisattvas.